do this. We need to get some of those plastic things you put them in so they don't do this, right? Just worry about that. Is that good?
That's great.
All right.
Do I need to?
You don't have a presentation, right?
No. Well,
No, Ricardo does. I just wanted to make sure he's the only one we need up.
¿Dice presentación?
No, le pusimos gente para escribir lo que está pasando en Baja y el incremento, ¿no? Cómo se están gestando estas iniciativas en Tijuana para tratar de organizarnos, ¿no? Y el trabajo que estamos haciendo con la Universidad Estatal de San Diego, con Rogelio, lo que estamos haciendo en CETYS para poner, vamos a poner un contexto, ¿no? Una review en general, ¿no?
Good afternoon. Thanks very much for sticking with us through the day. Appreciate it. We have a really interesting panel. It's something different than we've done. As I said earlier in the day, this is our second annual competitive border conference. But this is really the first time that we've had a panel like this as a piece of it. And that's because, we spend so much of the time when we're thinking about border economics and border competitiveness and how the border impacts regional competitiveness, thinking about how we move parts from A to B. And increasingly, we now understand that they actually go from A to B and then back to A, and then they move back and forth across the border. But we're really obsessed with making that an efficient process, and there's good reason for it. There are huge economic benefits to be had by making the border more efficient. But there's a lot more to do than just make the border more efficient in terms of economic development for the region, creating opportunities for the region, and making the region as a whole the most competitive possible. And so those are some of the themes that we're going to actually look into, is what are these next generation things? I mean, one of the ways of thinking about that is, so you have these supply chains that crisscross the border. Well, how can we make the border region add more value to those supply chains, sort of get further integrated into those supply chains? To do that, you need new businesses, right? You need smaller businesses. You need not just the top tier suppliers, but you need to grow the smaller businesses that will plug into that and build their way up through it. That requires human capital. That requires the right business environment. It requires a whole plethora of things. And so the angle into that we're going to be looking at is innovation and entrepreneurship. And it's actually, it's a great time to be talking about this because it's something that's risen over the last few years up and up and up the bilateral agenda. It's something that the US and Mexican governments are focusing a lot of attention on now. And that's why we're very excited to have, as one of our panelists, Rachel Poynter, who's the acting director of the Office of Mexican Affairs of the Department of State. She's somebody who knows the border region extraordinarily well. She's worked at the National Security Council working on the border before. She worked in the Department of State as the border coordinator, and is now graduating to take on more and more responsibilities within that sphere, including the agendas that related to FOBESI and MUSAIC. And I won't get into explaining what those are because I'll let you take that role, explaining the big mouthful of acronyms that we have in our relationship between the United States and Mexico. But needless to say, thanks very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Next in the line, we have Ricardo Alvarez. Ricardo is from the Tijuana area. He's a professor at CETYS University there. He holds a BA in advertising from the Communication Sciences Center in Mexico City, an MBA with concentration in marketing, and a DBA in degree in strategic management from Alliant International University in San Diego. He's someone who works with incubators in the Tijuana, San Diego area. He's somebody who's worked on looking at the Baja region, the regional economy there, which is really a center of entrepreneurship on both sides of the border. And as somebody who has their hands in the educational component of how you make that happen happen, how you train entrepreneurs, and increasingly also in some of the hands-on doing it as a mentor for entrepreneurs in the area. Thanks very much for joining us also. And last but certainly not least, and also just in the nick of time, we decided this is a just-in-time conference. We have someone who just arrived. We didn't have to pay money to have him stored in a warehouse anywhere before earlier today. We didn't have to buy him lunch because we have a just-in-time lean conference. And Rogelio just made it from the airport to join us. Rogelio is an entrepreneur. He's from Monterrey. He's a serial entrepreneur, someone who's been involved in the creation of many businesses and runs Alta Ventures. One of the, there aren't that many venture capital funds in Mexico. This is one of them, and one of the larger ones and very successful ones. And he, working in Monterrey, has a unique viewpoint from which to see the ways to leverage the U.S.-Mexico border. I think is one of the things I want to ask about later on, but the U.S.-Mexico border is not just an obstacle, it's an opportunity. Binational businesses have opportunities to do things that other businesses don't, so we want to be thinking about how that works and just learn from some of the experience that you've had, because we want to see more people being able to do the types of things that you're doing. Thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
If you don't mind, I'll start at the end with Rachel. We'll get sort of the government, the federal to federal, the big picture, and we'll start drilling down into some of the specifics of businesses and regions as we move throughout the panel. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure to be with the Mexico Institute here at the Wilson Center. Thank you, Chris, for pulling together what looks to have been already a really fabulous day, and then what still holds to be some really great discussions we're going to have. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here, both in the audience and on the panel. I'm thrilled to be able to be here today to talk about some things that I don't often get to talk about, and frankly that I think the U.S. government doesn't get to really advertise in terms of what we're doing on entrepreneurship and innovation with the government of Mexico. So for me, this is a really great opportunity to look at some other aspects in terms of the border, and as you say, looking at it as an opportunity for growth and not just discussing some of the obstacles we have right at the border. Traditionally, I think geographic borders tend to divide two countries, but I think as all of us know, for us, families, friends, businesses, and schools on the U.S.-Mexico border have a shared history and deep ties, and our border unites us. And at the Department of State, a huge chunk of what we're doing is focusing on how to strengthen that, continually finding new and creative ways to work with our Mexican colleagues and many border stakeholders to foster economic prosperity and to keep finding new and creative ways to work together. Today we should be here for about an hour, maybe more or less. During that time, the U.S. and Mexico will have traded about $60 million worth of goods and services. The daily trade totals are staggering. It's $1.5 billion, as you know, which supports millions of jobs in both countries. And that really, I think, highlights the issue of workforce development for us at the border. How did we become so intertwined? And where do we go from here to strengthen our partnerships for the good of both of our peoples? I think I'd like to highlight in the next few minutes some of the multi-sector cross-border partnerships that are creating a global workforce, propelling technology and research, and growing businesses. Clearly, the Cali-Baja region offers the perfect example, I think, of cross-border entrepreneurship. So I'm thrilled to have Ricardo here to talk about that. And clearly, the efforts by Rogelio in the other parts of our border and in the Monterrey region are critical. I think in the Cali-Baja region, you have companies like 3D Robotics in the area of advanced manufacturing. You have Parallel 6 in the area of technology services that are success stories. But what the U.S. is doing is working with Mexico, in part through the Mexico-U.S. Entrepreneurship and Innovation Council, to continue to identify new clusters. I was just in Tijuana and saw the Business Innovation Technology Center there. That's also a great example of how the business community is bringing together entrepreneurs, researchers, and business support service providers to kind of give the startup community an extra push, particularly along the border. And of course, part of how we're doing this is working under the auspices of the High-Level Economic Dialogue, which was launched in 2013 between our two presidents, and I think which is really designed to build close and productive partnerships and relationships between our key economic and regulatory agencies, but it also attempts to use those relationships to solve problems large and small, and to give a push where we need to at a high level, but to also have an opportunity to hear from our private sector colleagues, from entrepreneurs, from civil society, where it is we should engage and where it is we can do better as governments. Within that framework, the U.S.-Mexico Entrepreneurship and Innovation Council, we call it MUSEIC, was formed. And for 2015, MUSEIC is really focused on the commercialization of new technologies, including with the Mexican National Council of Science and Technology, CONACYT. There's several things I'd like to highlight. As a key component to this strategy, the National Science Foundation kicked off its Innovation Core, we call it the I-Core program, in Mexico in mid-March. And that links U.S. and Mexican researchers and entrepreneurs to overcome lab-to-market challenges. I-Core is training 60 Mexican researchers and entrepreneurs in techniques to bring their products to market. And these are products that will make a difference. Let me just give you a couple of examples. Unmanned aerial vehicles that farmers could use for crop dusting, a medical device that would reduce the cost of accurately measuring deformed corneas, an online rehab program and community allowing patients to receive medical advice remotely. Just a few examples of some of the innovative ideas and some of the things that we're working on that really drill down into specifics. MUSEIC is also aiming to strengthen partnerships of the institutions that help our businesses grow. So small business development centers are a key part of this. Last year in September in Dallas, we held a sister small business development center workshop, which resulted in partnership agreements among U.S., Mexican, Canadian, and Central American small business development centers. And I think that's key. Separately, the La Idea Incubator Partnership has brought 10 entrepreneurs each from Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Peru to attend trainings at U.S. business incubators. So in addition to what we're doing with the United States and Mexico bilaterally, we're also working these same ideas regionally. And all of those efforts really form a part of where we are focused as a government. We'll provide 50 more scholarships to Mexican entrepreneurs and 50 colleagues each from the other Pacific Alliance countries for additional trainings at specialized incubators over the course of 2015. And I think the importance of these programs is more than the products they roll out today. It's also the potential for greater joint research and product development tomorrow. The other thing I'd like to highlight, Chris noted that we're very good at our acronyms, and he's exactly right, is our work together on education. In addition to MUSEIC, we launched the U.S.-Mexico Bilateral Forum on Higher Education, Innovation, and Research in 2013, which we call FOBESI. And that is an effort to really expand opportunities for educational exchanges, scientific research partnerships, and cross-border innovation. Since academic year 2013, FOBESI helped facilitate the travel of almost 27,000 Mexican students and researchers to the United States, doubling the numbers of Mexican students studying in the U.S. And I think key to this is working with the private sector and academia to accelerate workforce development, really hitting on workforce development, and particularly our goals in the energy, technology, and advanced manufacturing sectors. Additionally, and I'm not sure that folks are fully aware of this, in January, the U.S. and Mexico signed a memorandum of understanding that created a U.S.-Mexico intern program to help accelerate and provide reciprocal exchange opportunities in high-demand sectors for college students and recent graduates from both countries, which I think really will help facilitate those exchanges. The programs I mentioned, that I've mentioned so far, I think galvanize our efforts on the border and benefit both of our countries broadly. But I also think the government, private sector, and academia are really collaborating specifically in and around the border to prioritize cross-border innovation. So I'll just talk for a minute about some of what we're seeing right on the border. I think border communities have really capitalized on President Obama's 100,000 Strong in the Initiative, 100,000 Strong in the Americas Initiative. I think most of you are familiar with this initiative, which is designed to increase educational exchanges between the United States and the Americas to 100,000 in each direction by 2020. And from the inception, we designed the initiative as a cooperative model between private sector, government, and university partners, recognizing the importance of workforce development and the importance of the private sector in this model. And we chose it because business leaders have a shared interest in developing a highly skilled and educated workforce that thrives in a global economy. And the border region really represents that. We teamed up with private and public sector individuals to create the 100,000 Strong in the Americas Innovation Fund to provide grants to universities and community colleges to incentivize study abroad. And I'll just note some of the higher education institutions along the border that have been awarded funding from the 100,000 Strong Innovation Fund, CETYS, UTEP, University of New Mexico, California State, University of California, Arizona State, and University of Mexico, Baja, California. So there are definitely institutions along the border that are taking advantage of this. And I'll highlight another couple of examples. The University of North Texas and CETYS, Mexicali, were awarded a grant to promote undergraduate and graduate student mobility between the U.S. and Mexico, focused specifically on STEM workforce needs in both countries. And then UTEP and CETYS, Ensenada, are using the grant to strengthen educational exchanges within UTEP sustainability engineering programs. So there's some really interesting things going on right now in academia. And the other thing I would note is that institutions are doing more and more to reduce the financial barriers to education near the border. I would note that University of New Mexico and New Mexico State offer scholarships to qualifying international students that effectively decrease their tuition to in-state rates, which is really wonderful. And then, I'll just turn finally to issues that are near and dear to all of our hearts, which is the need for innovation and creativity when we look at specifically at the border and moving across the border. We know that the easier people and goods can cross our shared border, the stronger and more efficient our economy is. Delays at the border cost real money. I know you all have talked about it. One study has found that traffic congestion costs our economies an estimated $1.9 billion in direct economic losses and some 5,000 jobs a year. So that element is really important, and it is part of the reason that our two governments launched the U.S.-Mexico 21st Century Border Management Initiative, an initiative that has really helped strengthen our conversations on a daily basis at both a high level and a working level on the secure flow of goods and people across the border, corridor security, and clearly on infrastructure needs. And you're going to hear from Assistant Secretary Alan Burson and Charge Alejandra Estivio a little bit later about some of those efforts. But I will note that I think we're seeing a lot of innovation and creativity, and there's certainly a recognition that in addition to facilitating improvements of infrastructure itself, there's also a need to think creatively, and we're really seeing that. I would highlight the Cross-Border Express facility in Tijuana. And right across the border to San Diego, which is a project that I was there at the very beginning when a group of private sector folks came to us and brought this crazy idea asking about presidential permitting at the State Department. And the idea was really a new concept, and it links, for those of you who aren't that familiar, it essentially via footbridge, it links the Tijuana airport to port of entry on the U.S. side that is being built, allowing folks to take advantage of the flights at the Tijuana airport that access Asia and other parts of Mexico, given that the San Diego airport is so limited. And when folks came to us with that idea, the project developers had already done assessments of where people were going to and from the Tijuana airport. It was a really innovative and interesting idea, and it really sets a precedent for us, I think, as two governments and as, folks very interested in the border in terms of new ideas of moving people across the border. I know you all have talked a lot about pre-inspection, so I won't focus on that, but clearly that idea and the idea of how we can move goods across is incredibly important. And so collaborating to find other ways to reduce border wait times is important. Having established data that we can look at and really work together as two governments is incredibly important. And I think through pilot programs that grant front of line and other privileges in Mexico to trusted traders, also incredibly important. And we are working on those things, and clearly what I'll finish on is the fact that we have such a good dialogue with our border stakeholders. The input that comes from academic institutions, from the private sector, is incredibly important to the two governments to help us, to push us, frankly, both governments, and help us figure out the right solutions to problems and innovative ways that we can work together. I think if we continue to streamline government policies and procedures and work creatively with the private sector and invest in joint research and education, the greatest investment, our border, will continue to be a symbol of our partnership and prosperity. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Rachel. So government can even be innovative, turns out. Thanks so much. Ricardo, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you, Chris, for inviting me here. My name is Ricardo Alvarez. I'm in charge of the MBA program at CETYS University in Tijuana. CETYS University is a small non-for-profit institution. We have campuses in Mexicali, Ensenada, and Tijuana. We're located in Baja, California. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the entrepreneurship ecosystem or environment in the Baja region. I know that maybe you're familiar with the Cali-Baja mega region, but I want to welcome you to our place. The Cali-Baja region, or mega region as it is called, comprises two counties, San Diego County and Imperial Valley County in the northern state of California, and the four major cities in Baja, that's Tecate, Tijuana, Mexicali, and Ensenada. And the population on that mega region is almost 7 million people, and we have like 3.1 labor force, 3.1 million of labor force. An interesting thing about this mega region is our binational and bicultural backgrounds that helps to bring us together. We can understand the way U.S. companies and Americans like to work and what they demand, what are the quality standards. So we're able to respond and we're able to deliver and commit in doing so. So this mega regions, one of the key advantages is that you can have labor, real high-skilled labor workforce that can execute, and that's one major thing here in the Cali-Baja region. Also, there's a lot of universities, research and development institutions, great infrastructure, and most of all, some strategic clusters and some strategic industries that are fostering the development of new entrepreneur programs and new entrepreneur ventures. And that's the interesting part of it. So a new breed of entrepreneurs are booming in our region, and it's been a vibrant network both in the San Diego region and in the Baja region. The San Diego environment, the San Diego entrepreneurship ecosystem comprises both volunteer-based groups like San Diego Startup and the San Diego Entrepreneurship Group, the San Diego Venture Group, and a lot of also philanthropists and like the Moxie Foundation and the Sam family that invested in incubators both in three universities, San Diego State University, University of San Diego, and UCSD, University of California, San Diego. So we have incubators, we have accelerators. It's an approximate number of probably 100 incubators and accelerators in the region. About 40 business venture capital firms all are in the region also. So the entrepreneurship is booming, and Tijuana being so close to California, it's also impacting the way the entrepreneurship environment is developing in our region. We have an initiative by the local government in Tijuana. It's called Emprende Tijuana, and the government wanted to gather together all entrepreneurs, incubators, accelerators,
private investors, financing, and government agencies, academia. So they come up with the idea of building like a virtual organization that's Emprende Tijuana to promote entrepreneurship with just one face, with just one front, all across universities and in different events. So they're promoting this idea of entrepreneuring in our region. Part of Emprende Tijuana, it's CETYS University, the university I work for. We have an incubator, and we also have an interesting MBA program on entrepreneurship. But as you can see, it is like a constellation of organizations that are working together to promote and foster entrepreneurship in our region. And we're working together with the groups in San Diego so we can, have a mutual understanding of what is needed and share our knowledge and share our experiences. But all morning long, we've been hearing about infrastructure and all the things that are coming in and all the resources that entrepreneurs can have. But I believe that entrepreneurship is about entrepreneurs. It's about the guys doing it. So nobody is
And girls.
and girls and girls. Not all the people are willing to become an entrepreneur. Not everybody's willing to do so, but they're the ones driving it. So the entrepreneurship community, the startup community, has to be part or formed by entrepreneurs. And that's where CETYS and the educational institutions come in, because our idea is that we can foster, we can nurture entrepreneurship if we teach the discipline. I believe that entrepreneurship can be taught, and education is a great enabler of entrepreneurship enterprises. And how is this done? Because if you teach entrepreneurship, you can build on entrepreneur self-efficacy. As students get involved in co-curricular activities and get involved with or exposed to entrepreneurial events, pitch competitions, business plan, business models, all of this help them feel more comfortable and self-confident that they can start a business somewhere in the future. So nurturing the self-efficacy is part of what we're doing with our educational programs, and also building what is known as entrepreneurial competencies. So what students should know, students should know what to do, and how should they think about it. So we're working on building the entrepreneurship mindset among students. It's not just one course or two or first courses or just a project. No, it's a whole mindset about being innovative and being creative and being open to try new things. And one of the other things we're teaching is how to deal with failure and how to deal with risk and uncertainty. And that's a part of the tale that's sometimes is not well told. There's a hype for entrepreneurship in our country, and everybody's happy about, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, but the call numbers says that probably 2 out of every 10 are the ones that are going to make it, and probably 9 or 8 are going to fail. So that's the crude reality about entrepreneurship also. And we need to teach students about this and for them to learn about when things can go wrong. There's a book in Mexico, it's called Fucked Up Nights, and it's about conversations with entrepreneurs that fucked up and yeah, they fail. And this now they're starting this going in different cities, and Monterrey and Ensenada and Tijuana, and doing these talks, and where entrepreneurs can talk their nightmares, what went wrong, and so it's a very interesting way of teaching others that when things can go wrong, they can, and so you better prepare to do so. What are we doing at CETYS? We just redesigned our MBA program, and we developed a whole concentration on entrepreneurship. We also conducted international courses with San Diego State University, University of San Diego, and also with in other parts in Munich and London and Prague and Italy. So we're trying to bring our students to be exposed on entrepreneurship in other parts of the world, what's going around in other latitudes. And also we have what we call visiting professors and distinguished chairs. You can see there Alex DeNoble. He's the president of the Lavin Center at San Diego State University. San Diego State University has, I would say, that the number 10 program in California on entrepreneurship. And he's a distinguished chair with us at CETYS, and he's been bringing this entrepreneurship expertise and knowledge to our campus. We also have the CETYS incubators, and we're doing now joint research between both UABC, CETYS, and also San Diego State on different topics on entrepreneurship. And in 2016, on January, we're going to be co-hosting the USASB conference in San Diego, and we're bringing a group of professors and to the Baja region, so they can take a peek and look what's going on with the ecosystem in our lands. It's not only about gangs and safety and security, and so there's a vibrant energy and there's a vibrant community working on entrepreneurial programs in our city. So that's part of what we're doing at CETYS and trying to promote entrepreneurship. And the future challenges is, well, we got to be more empathetic with each other and learn more about each other, and be open to start thinking in a more collaborative way. And I would say, like, we need to change our inner chip, our mindset. As Mexicans, we are kind of, we don't like to take risks. We don't like uncertainty. And we don't like probably working in teams that much. So we have to change that ideas. We have to change the way we think. And I believe we have to become more unreasonable. And here's a final quote that says that reasonable man adapts himself to the environment, but the unreasonable one is the one that changes. And all progress depends upon this unreasonable thinking. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ricardo. That was great. And I think that what you said about the culture around failure and the ability to, what it means if you have only 1 or 2 out of 10 startups that succeed is that you need people that don't start one time, but continue to start and start until they do succeed. And that's why we have the term serial entrepreneur in the first place, right? Is because that's what it takes to have a success story.
You have to learn from
failure. So let's hear how it goes.
You have to be persistent.
All yours, Rogelio.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Chris. And let me share a story and give you some perspective of where I come from. And I didn't do a presentation, but I did on the plane here. I started putting some things that I think we should propose, our different initiatives that will help develop. Well, our title was Innovation and Entrepreneurship in the border region. I come from a middle-class family that I was born in Acuña, in the state of Coahuila, that was moved into Monterrey. My father worked for 16 years at Visa, now it's FEMSA. And then he separated himself when I was in high school. And I got inspired by what he started doing, that they started creating companies, very traditional companies. But I got inspired and I said, I want to become someone that creates things. And since then, I've been very involved with promoting entrepreneurship in my hometown in Monterrey. I started when I was in college creating an organization, nonprofit called Generación Empresarial Mexicana. Through that organization, I became acquainted with pretty much most of the captains of industry of Mexico, many political leaders from the world, like President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher. And then I graduated and decided to dedicate a couple of years more to this idea of that everyone should become an entrepreneur and have an entrepreneurial attitude. Back then, when I studied mechanical engineering at Tec de Monterrey, we had a course on entrepreneurship. It was mandatory, but it was just one course on my sixth semester, and I think I did something that was not meaningful back then as an idea or as a project, but it was an intent. Since then, until 2007, I have launched 7 companies, and I have sold 3 of them. Of those 7, 2 were in the space of education, and I've had a passion for education. And I became very interested in the education subject because during my master's degree, a professor pretty much said, if you really want to impact this world, you have to go through the education space. And I remember I went to visit the community colleges in the Alamo district in San Antonio, the South Texas Community College in McAllen. And I was impressed because it was not a DNA difference that was really making a person become very productive. 80% of the people attending the Alamo district in San Antonio were Mexican or Mexican descendants. And in McAllen, I think it was 95% or more. And through that, I have always seen, and as an entrepreneur, you'll find out that entrepreneurs are very, very proactive, but also very positive. We always see the glass half full. And in 2007, when I sold my 7th company, it was a chain of movie theaters that I had built from scratch. And I tried to raise money in Mexico. It was really difficult. We did it with some personal savings and some angel investors. And at the end, I remember that because I had a U.S. partner, I was able to get access to funding from OPIC, Overseas Private Investment Corporation. And I think that it was the first time that they were investing in an early stage company in entertainment and doing cinemas in Mexico. But the good thing is that everything I promised to them, I really missed it because everything was exceeded. And they say, how many of those can you make? So I started building many. I got to 69 units, and then a very big company called Cinepolis came and acquired it. And a conversation I had with Fernando Fabre, now the president of Endeavor, it's a global accelerator that is based in New York, with presence in Mexico for more than 12 years and in many other countries. He said, Roger, don't do another startup. You should start looking at the opportunity of creating the venture industry in Mexico because that's the only way that you can replicate yourself. You can become an investor, but also manage other people's money to invest into this space. And the reason, in hindsight, I would say that when you have a country that is, and the last time I did this analysis, because I did it for the state of Texas, the state of California, Mexico is, if not the top, one of the top 3 partners of the states, California and Texas. So it's in the best interest of California and Texas to develop that side of the border because more jobs will have more disposable income and will buy more products from the U.S. as well. And right now, I mean, you go to Monterrey and it's considered the 5th largest city of Texas. It's pretty much the same. We share many values, and it's different from Oaxaca, but we're talking about this northern part of the country. And so with this idea that I got excited when Fernando shared with me this concept, I said, sure, let's do it. And I think that if I had known what I was going into, I would have not gotten into. But really, once you get into things and you start exploring and you start looking at things, you cannot stop. And you want things to change, things to happen. In our case, 50% of our population is less than 27 years old. And what I've learned through these days is that if you don't build the infrastructure so that those people can or allow themselves to dream, to take risks, and to take their ideas to some place so that they can get support, independent of who you are, who you met, who you know, or what's your family name, or how much money do you have, you don't have the country's youth and the energy of them building the future. And with that concept, I said, well, let's let's help build that infrastructure. And really, there was no clear answer of why $1 trillion economy just on the side of the the U.S. Country, with Silicon Valley just a very short flight away, didn't have a venture capital industry. And we went in and started doing a lot of analysis. We came up with 35 initiatives. We grouped them in 5 areas, and we started lobbying big time. But really, the first 2 years, I became a travel agency. That was my first step into venture capital. I was convincing public policy officials, the heads of UNAM, Tec de Monterrey, Universidad Panamericana, the National or the Science Council, CONACYT, the development banks, and I was bringing them to Silicon Valley, to Salt Lake City, to Houston, to Austin, so they could understand what an ecosystem works like and what are the different elements of the ecosystem. And all the cities have an ecosystem in place. The only difference is that some of them are more developed than others. The ecosystem of Oaxaca, it's there, it exists. Maybe it's not vibrant and it doesn't pulse at the right speed, but if you compare it with the ecosystem of Austin or Silicon Valley, it's totally different. So there's an intangible wealth that happens in those ecosystems. And this conversation I think is going to be really good. Well, since then, I said my 8th startup is going to be, I want to help spur or accelerate the development of this ecosystem, and I will create my own venture fund. So since then, I've been investing. So far, I've done 25 investments. I'm managing a $70 million fund, which got support from like 35% of the money comes from development banks, multilaterals, the IFC of the World Bank, the FOMIN of IADB, and the Mexican Fund of Funds. The rest is from Mexican families that for the first time, they said, this makes sense. And you know when the shift happened? In April 2010, after making many of these trips to the US, there was an interest in some of these families. Said, okay, why don't you get us together? So by invitation, I got 300 families together, and I brought these public policy officials and told them, come on, let's talk to these families about the benefits of creating this industry. The problem was that many of them didn't know about the venture industry. And so I put a group of 60 MBAs to work, 30 from Monterrey and 30 from Guadalajara. And I said, let's do summaries of papers of what has been going on in Israel, in the US, in Australia. So we gave them summaries of these papers, and they started studying this information. And they came and they were like experts. So they were preaching to these families that this was a good thing, that it should happen in Mexico. From there, you cannot imagine the amount of initiatives that have happened in the country as a whole. From the initiative of creating technology transfer offices, to creating fund of funds to invest in venture or seed, to many other initiatives that have really helped accelerate this ecosystem. Now, let me tell you, and I'm going to go to the ideas, and I'll start promoting them or proposing them. So for us, I think that ecosystems thrive when there's the critical mass of the 3 main actors: the founders, that are the entrepreneurs, the innovators that provide the innovation capacity, and the funders, that is investment capacity. The funders is just a catalytic element. It's just like pouring some gasoline so that the fire starts faster or builds bigger. But the important thing about these 3 elements or 3 participants is that what they are really looking for is to build informal, trusted networks. Remember that business happens at the speed of trust. So the interactions between them is critical. We need to create incentives or mechanisms so that, imagine that you have 3 engranes. Being a mechanical engineer, I should know this, but that are working together, and the more points of contact between them, the better or the possibilities of creating more through serendipity outcomes, it increases substantially. But these three groups have to work in a friendly environment where trust, abundance, and big ideas are promoted. So, and where does this leave the other players like government, corporations, university, and mentors? There's a role for each of them. But the reality is that what we need to do is not step on their way and don't make it easy for them. Entrepreneurs have to go through the hard way of getting things done. That's part of the experience and the process of going through challenges and having an idea become a real project that is creating an impact. So since this is a contact sport, I am of the opinion that the imaginary borders don't matter much. That what's really critical is that the connections between the key constituents within a city and between cities is what we should promote. I have many other ideas that I want to share with you, but I have to give them one at a time.
We'll have some conversation about that now. Thanks so much, Rogelio. That's great. It's great to hear your story, and it's an inspiring one. We have just a few minutes left, so I think I have one question that I want to ask, but why don't we at the same time grab maybe two more questions from the audience, and then we can just go back to all the panelists for a response. So we've got one up here up front, and a second one back there in the middle back. Yeah.
Miguel Aguirre from San Diego, thank you very much for your presentation. Very inspiring. And this really is what we're talking about, is how do you innovate? To quote the book State of the Border Report written by Eric Lee and Chris Wilson, the border region is one of the most exciting stories in the global economy. Mm-hmm. Let's make it exciting. Let's pour that gas on it. It's program rich, system poor. How do we bring it all together? And what I say is really missing is the Mexican voice, the binational voice, because after all, the border region is Mexican American. And so we need to bring that formula, those frameworks that you represent, to the point. You've got the high level economic dialogue up here. You've got trade this way. But really, the socioeconomic connection is right here in our ports of entry and border communities. And that's the place I think you could really foment what I like to call border fusion. So thank you very much for sharing and inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, Connor Smith from the Council of the Americas. Something I didn't hear touched on very much was sort of social entrepreneurship and social impact investing. I know we talked a little bit about how, especially on the Mexican side of the border, we need to sort of develop things like education, health infrastructure, and microfinance, for example. What infrastructure, what efforts are in place, if any of you guys could touch on that in terms of that type of entrepreneurship and that type of investment?
Great, thank you. And if I can, I'm going to just throw one more on. And it's something that we've been talking about, but I just wanted to, since we're thinking about the border, and I started off by saying the border is also an opportunity. It's not just an impediment. There are definitely some things I want us to dig into. What are the ways that the border can be leveraged as a tool for innovation? How is it that, in the Cali Baja context, you actually use the division that the border creates, or the differences, the unevenness of the terrain of the two different sides? How can that be actually an asset to entrepreneurs rather than just an obstacle for them? And, one of the, we talked about things like educational partnerships and research partnerships, so that's certainly got to be a piece of it there. Access to finance and utilizing OPEC because you had, usually different tools because you have maybe registering a business in the U.S. even as a tool to gain financing in Mexico, or there's all sorts of things there. One thing that, to just pitch in our own little piece of it that we've been doing at the Wilson Center over the past couple of years is we've had a high-level innovation forum for legislators. We've brought up a group of Mexican legislators each of the past 2 years, and we'll do it again this fall to learn about the innovation ecosystem. Sort of what you were talking about, you were bringing up all these officials and university folks to understand the innovation ecosystem. Well, we're trying to do the same thing in the Mexican Congress so that we have that same level of understanding of what it takes at the policy side, because they help create that framework, that innovation innovation ecosystem that includes, the educational institutions, government, as well as the private sector, obviously. But so it's a big question, but whatever sort of tack on it you guys would like to take, I'd love to hear some more thoughts on it. So we can go ahead.
Well, as Rachel was mentioning about the FOBESI program, and at CETYS we took advantage of that scholarships through CONACYT. So we brought a group of students to San Diego, so they can live there and practice entrepreneurship and go and participate in all the entrepreneurial activities within San Diego, say, and get in touch with San Diego entrepreneurs. And then we mix them with German students also, and we're bringing the Germans to Mexico, and we're trying to, work in this kind of mixes where they can learn from both sides. And as you were asking, what are we doing in terms of getting together? We're bringing professors from San Diego, say, to CETYS to do that research together. Mm-hmm. And also we're starting this, the University of San Diego already did it. It's called a B2 pitch, or venture betting pitch. And they're working in those two separate tracks, the U.S. track and the international track. And they're inviting then students to participate in these pitch competitions. So things are moving.
And you can do that in the border region at a much lower cost than you could do that, between, not that it's great to have exchange between Washington, D.C. and Mexico City, or anywhere, Chicago and Guadalajara, but the cost, the ability to do it in the border region is just, it's incomparable. Yeah, thanks. Either of you too.
Well, I think that the opportunity living in Monterey, and I have said that this is one of the cities that is very well connected to the state of Texas. Some of the things that we've been doing is that we work very closely, for example, many of our organizations with Austin. And Austin as well is a very good thriving ecosystem. I'll give you some examples of things that have been working together. For example, right now we're trying to push our pension funds. Since 2009, they can now invest in private equity venture capital, but only in Mexico. But we want them to open their doors. We unlocked like $19 billion to be invested into real estate infrastructure and private equity. And this is an opportunity for now. I mean, when I was starting, there were like 2 or 3 funds operating in the venture space in Mexico. Now, there are like 125 groups investing. And it's just 5 years away. The other thing is that we've been promoting entrepreneurship and technology commercialization in the educational system. I serve on the board of Tec de Monterrey, and I am the chair of the Entrepreneurship Institute. We have committed to develop the entrepreneurship skills in 100% of the students. And that is a very big commitment. Every time we explain this to Stanford or Berkeley, they get surprised because it's a big task. And just to give you an example, and following the South by Southwest Festival, I don't know if you're acquainted with it, but it's been going for 30 years. It's really a place where the creative industries are celebrated. We're doing the same, but focused on entrepreneurship. This year, we're going to be the host of the Startup Nation Summit that takes place during the Global Entrepreneurship Week. And we're going to have the heads of public policy and research for around 70 countries there. And this is a festival that we started 2 years ago. The first year was an experiment. We had 4,000 entrepreneurs. Second year, 8,000. This year, we're expecting like 15,000. And it's not only like last year was like 30% of them came from abroad, from Latin America or from the U.S. Our cities are really tied together, and they have many initiatives going on. I have many proposals that I would like to leave here with the Institute.
We'll find a way to get them out.
I need your help to make them happen.
Thank
the
you.
entrepreneurs need your help.
Thanks, Rogelio. Last word, Rachel?
The only thing I would add, Chris, just in response to your question of, how do we leverage the border specifically and the dynamic? opportunity we have there, and whether it be the similarities or differences. And I think, the thing about the border is that you have binational ecosystems. When Rogelio talks about ecosystems, you're looking at a very unique opportunity in that it's a binational situation. And you yourself have written on how integrated our economies are. And so you have a precedent set in the border region for doing business back and forth across the border and utilizing the links that already exist between people, between families, between businesses, to kind of jump on that, and particularly to work with that in the entrepreneurship setting. So I think that's already happening very much so in the Cali Baja region, perhaps not quite as much in other parts of the border. And it's an incredibly long border where we have a lot of opportunities and a lot of places where we can take lessons learned and really jump on that. So to me, just specifically on that question, I think there's a lot of exciting opportunity there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. Let's give them a warm
Thank you, Chris.
applause. We have one last session that's coming right up. We have Ambassador Estivil, as well as Assistant Secretary of DHS, Alan Burson, that will have a conversation on bilateral cooperation and the evolution of that over time. So hold your seats, and we'll be right back up in 1 second as we do the transition.
Okay. That's fine.